Good evening. Good evening. Yes, it's 5 p.m. Good evening. I'm going to make sure that we get started on time so I can get you all out of here. Welcome. Welcome. I am the keynote closing speech. All right. You are already cheering. Yes. My name is Dr. Cheryl Ingram, and I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Diversity LLC that does diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting. I'm also the founder recently of a tech company that will be launching soon that does a diversity and inclusion and equity assessment tool. So, I'm all over the game when it comes to DEI. Follow me, hashtag on Twitter, Diversity LLC, or on Instagram, etc. So, today, I'm going to be talking to you about women in tech, why our diversity needs diversity. And in specifics, I'm going to be addressing some of the intersectional discriminations that we as women face and also that we implement on one another within the field of tech. I mean everywhere, not just within the field of tech. Since this is a ChickTech Conference, we'll specifically target tech. Now let me get started with some of the things that we already know that exist in some way, shape, or form for women, especially in the technical industry. One is sexual harassment. We face a wage gap, a perception gap. Like, what is a perception gap? Don't worry, I'm going to get to that, I promise. Social mobility and professional mobility. We face a hiring bias. We have imposter syndrome. We have to cover. And then there's intersectional discrimination, right? Where you have racism, you have sizeism, you have sexism, you have xenophobia, you have transphobia. I mean, the list could go on and on and on, but I only got 15 minutes, so I'm gonna stop there. But you pick up what I'm putting down, right? Et cetera, et cetera. And I do not mean to, et cetera, some of the things that, if anybody's facing discrimination that I did not name, but just for the sake of time, I felt the need to add that. Now, how many of you have heard the beautiful statements that the world is just seeming to love about diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance, equity means you are playing my jam, right? I call BS, and here's why. I know you look at that and you're like, what? I'm like, let's party or not. Why should it? One, because all three of those statements are laced with the fact that you have to wait for somebody to invite you to the party, right? For example, diversity being invited to the party. I like to think of it instead of, what if you were actually on the committee that planned the party? Instead of the idea that you have to wait for someone to invite you in order to be there. Inclusion means that you are invited to the dance floor. But what if you get to design the dance floor before you even invite somebody on it? And personally, sometimes I like to leave. I don't want to wait for somebody to have to invite me to the dance floor. I might be the person doing the inviting. And that statement does not cover that. And then when you think about equity, playing your music, that is not enough to create a list with the DJ. It's like, what if you designed some sort of system that was able to measure the inclusion and the diversity in the party, that showed you where you had gaps or where you had growth areas, and then help you figure out how to plan a better party next time, right? So that's why I say I call BS on diversity and inclusion and being invited to the party. Now let's talk about inclusion. I like to say I'm happy to get on the dance floor. I like to believe just as much as anybody else. I won't break it down too much for y'all when I'm on the stage. But what does that really mean? What should inclusion be? If you want DEI to take place, think about diversity, equity, and inclusion in that regard. How do you get to plan the party? How do you get to help create a strategic plan for who gets invited? How do you include those voices, and then how do you measure whether or not there is actual impact? That's real DEI. Follow that philosophy and not the one that just invites you to the party. Now tell me if these numbers ring a bell for you. 67, 71, 72, 75, 77, 79, 81. Anybody know what those are? Shout it out. No? Please, I saw a hand.
How many cents to the dollar difference?
Exactly. How many cents to the dollar on average women earn compared to male-identified people in the workplace, depending on which data that you look at, right? But the problem is, in some way, shape, or form, what we see is that those numbers are not 100, and nor have they ever been. So how do you get them there? That is the problem. But what if I told you that women recruiters and hiring managers do the same thing to women during the hiring process? We undervalue one another depending on what biases and prejudices that we have. We don't offer as much money. We don't look for women when it comes to certain roles. Why is it that we do that? How is it that as a woman you might have the potential to discriminate against someone else during a hiring process? I call that a perception gap. Something is missing, right? There's a perception, there's a gap in your perception that has been created by a bias or a prejudice in some way, shape, or form, and something is missing. When we think about a perception gap, read this sentence for me. And don't talk about the syntax of my sentence, it has a purpose, okay? Funky frogs are the result of years of scientific research contrasted with the study of years. How many F's do you see? I'm only going to give you a couple seconds. How many F's do you see in that sentence? All right. Shout it out. How many F's did you see? 3, 5, 4, 6, 7. What if I told you that there were 6? F in funky, F in frogs, 2 ofs, that's 4. 1 in scientific, which is usually the one that most people miss, and then the F at the end before years. 6. Counting over and over and over again. What happened? How is it that everybody in this room saw the same sentence, read the same thing, but came up with different outcomes for what it is that they saw? How did that happen? Imagine if you think about that, and we do the same thing to human beings during the hiring process, during our retention, right? It's a certain perception. Our perception is based on our realities, and our realities are formed very different depending on our identities, especially if our identities are not part of a majoritarian or a normative identity. Happen right now in this room. Think about what happens when someone gets you in the room where they're going to hire you, or they are your manager, or you are their manager, etc., etc. Now, let's talk about diversity. What should it be, right? What does it look like? Come with me on this journey as we discuss how is it that companies should be defining what it is that diversity means. Well, diversity within itself is not about just race and gender. Now, don't get me wrong. Those are very important components, and you should not have a conversation in diversity without discussing race and gender in some way, shape, or form. But those are not the only components that you should be thinking about when it comes to diversity. Diversity is about having the complexity of multiple identities, whether different or similar, and how they exist in a common place. That's what diversity is, right? That's what it means. Now, don't get me wrong. Inclusion is the representation of those diversities that exist, and I'm going to get to that. But where you see employers going wrong is that many people want to define diversity in very different ways and exclude other diversities. How many of you have heard of this brilliant term, and I'm being sarcastic, that came up with diversity of thought, right? People are killing the term diversity with the idea of diversity of thought, and we want people who think differently. First of all, when the term diversity of thought first emerged, it covered people who come from different backgrounds and different walks of life. And if you think we currently live in a country where people who have different identities, especially visible ones and invisible ones, are not experiencing different walks of life and don't think differently, you are highly misinformed, and it is time for you to wake up. Okay? Because that is a misconception. Now, inclusion talks about how do you take all these identities and encompass them in a space that, one, is safe, that allows people to be their best selves, and provides equitable opportunity for them to show up at work all day, every day. Right? And when we think about inclusion, I see companies that now love to talk about ERGs and EIGs and BRGs. Does everybody know what those mean? Employee resource groups, employee inclusion groups, business resource groups, right? And many people are starting to think about diversity, that it exists in that light, and that has become a solution to the problem of diversity, equity, and inclusion in companies. They're like, oh, we're just going to start this group. Well, what do you see? And I say it all the time. You got surface, because when ERGs form, they have the 3 Fs, what we call the 3 Fs in DEI. Does anybody know what that means? Want to take a guess? You're like, no, I don't want to get it wrong. Just tell us. Food, fun, and festivities. You see ERGs, or affinity groups in general, that exist on a very surface level. Let me be very clear that ERGs should be meant for advocacy, for influence and impact, and to help with leadership and mobility within a company. Now, don't get me wrong, okay? It is great to have a place where you can share cultural traditions, but that should not be the purpose of doing that when you develop a group within a company, because it doesn't give you impact. So many people do that. They can go, if you sit down with me and we have a taco, we're going to have a Taco Tuesday, and we're going to celebrate diversity and talk about diversity. That is surface level and an insult to the cultural traditions of people who come from those backgrounds. That's why I say if you build an ERG, you better start thinking about a plan or a strategy that encompasses advocacy, that encompasses impact and influence, that talks about leadership and mobility, that makes connections, that has sponsors, that has mentors. You will need all of those things to remain sustainable and influential in the company. And if you don't have it, start to think about it now. Now, we've been talking about DEI for a very long time, okay? And I'm going to speak directly to women in the field about the way that the prejudices and the biases show up and that we face and that we place on other groups within our group, our gender identity, in 3 different areas: blind spots, culture fit, and meritocracy, okay? Now let's talk a little bit about blind spots. We know that men are less likely to see that there is an issue with gender equity within a company, or gender identity and equity when it comes to a company than women. They don't recognize it like we do. Why is that? Because they don't face it. Remember I said reality is based on perception. And if your perception has limited experience, then your reality may not believe someone else's. All right, but we do that to ourselves. Perception gap here is live and well. We cis women do it towards trans women, heterosexual women do it towards lesbian women, or LGBTQIA plus in general. We do it to women based on their size. White women do it to women who come from racially stigmatized identities, and notice that I don't say people of color, I say racially stigmatized identities, because if you think about it, whiteness is not invisible, but privilege is. So I say racially stigmatized identities instead of people of color. It's just my term, and I'm saying it right now on this recording so I can get more people to say it. Now, the list goes on and on, okay? Now, the challenge within the group is that within the disadvantaged groups within our gender, I'm here to tell you that we as women have to wake up. Because we think that because we are part of a disadvantaged group, that perhaps we don't have our own biases within our group. Or that if you are in a position of power and influence, how could you be capable of discriminating against someone else? Let's talk about intersection, okay? Intersections means that you can simultaneously face privilege and oppression at the same time. That is the tenet of what an intersection is. For example, if you are a white woman and you sit on the board of nothing but white people, a board of directors within a company, you are experiencing privilege and perhaps oppression at the same time, because one, you may be the only woman. So you have gender identity and you're facing oppression because of that. And if you have whiteness, you have privilege because of that. So the presence of you existing in that room means that you could be facing both of those simultaneously. That makes sense? All right, if it doesn't, come see me after. Now, you have to recognize that because of the identities that you have, especially if you have privilege, you will be biased against someone. All human beings have bias, okay? Good people have hidden biases. And sometimes they're not so hidden, they are very conscious. The thing that makes you a poo-poo head, and yes, I said poo-poo head, is if you know that if you don't believe that you have bias and you say, I treat everybody the same. That is why bias is unconscious in most respects, and because you can't detect it, you don't know that you have it. So you better find a way to start to evaluate how it is that it exists and why it is that you have it. Because in order for you to really do DEI work, you better do some serious self-reflection first. Because if you don't, and you always point the finger at other people, but you don't look at yourself, the biases that you have, DEI will not be sustainable, especially if you're the person leading the charge. And trust me, as a DEI consultant for 15 years, I've done a lot of self-reflection and continue to do it on a continual basis. Now let's talk about culture fit. This word should be destroyed. I mean, wipe it off the face of the map, and let me tell you why. All companies have culture. That's not a question. Okay, your mission, your vision, your values, your strategic plan, that is part of your company culture. The problem is when you start to make culture a fit. And you say that in order for you to exist in this company, you need to fit within a particular box, and if you don't, you cannot work here. Culture should be an addition. It should be malleable, okay? When you add new things to it, it should take new form. It should change over time. All human beings have different belief systems and values, trust me. But the thing is, if your belief systems and values are rooted in oppressing someone else because of who they are and what they look like, and you forbid them from getting an opportunity, you are the thing that should not fit in the culture. And you have to go, not the person who is different from you, okay? So when you think about creating a company culture, do it with the idea that it will be flexible, that it will change. Because as you add new people who come from diverse backgrounds, culture should be shaped around them, but it shouldn't confine who they are, and it shouldn't be predefined for them when they come in the door and make them assimilate and change or have to cover, no matter what the identity. You change your perception, like I said, you change your reality. our ability to hold on to certain truths that we have as they relate to our identity is also an enemy of diversity. Because when you think about it, you learn all these different things from church. You learn about these things in history books, from family, from friends, from people you love, people you trust. And imagery is a hell of a tool when it comes to diversity and inclusion, okay? It has the power to create bias. You can look at a person and immediately start to believe the things that they are, who they are and where they come from. You have to be willing to change that. Let's talk about meritocracy. The idea that if you just work hard and you keep working hard, you will find a job, you will live a quality life, and you won't face discrimination. Like everybody has an equal opportunity. How many of y'all like track and field? How many of y'all know of track and field? Okay, not like, okay, not think about the 100-yard dash. If you are, I'm in lane 2 and you're in lane 3, we are running the same distance to the finish line. But what if I have more hurdles in my lane than you do? Right? That's the idea. That's what makes meritocracy false. The idea that you think that everybody could or should be treated, or is treated the same. Not that they should, but you believe that everybody has a fair chance. It's like, and sometimes before we even get to run in the lane, there are certain things that I have to do depending on my identity, especially my race and gender, to even qualify to be able to run in that race. And then when I get to that race, I have to step over, or if you like me, crawl under perhaps hurdles in order to finish that race where you may not. Your journey is a lot easier than mine. That's like the idea of meritocracy, right? I used to have a boss. I worked in a nonprofit for a while, and older white man who was the president of the nonprofit, he said one of the most interesting things to me that I had ever heard. He said, you know, Cheryl, in the 1940s, I lived in, or 1950s and 60s, I grew up in Kentucky. And my father used to tell us, you know, we may be poor, we may live on the wrong side of the tracks, but at least we ain't black, right? That's the idea. That's what makes meritocracy false. Because the idea that because of an identity that you have, you can face more barriers. And people don't want to acknowledge that. And some people do it with the idea of good intention, but I'm over good intentions. Because good intention is sameness. You want everybody to be treated the same, right? But if you don't recognize that in order for that to happen, there are certain obstacles that you have to overcome. Besides thinking about a person's merit, then you live in a place that is an alternative fact or reality. Now, you see, when it comes to equity and equality, you think about whether it is visible or invisible, but let's talk about race for a second. You think about black women, Latinx women, Latina women, Asian women, Mexican women, Hispanic women. They are facing more barriers than white women when it comes to tech. Not that you are not facing barriers, white women, because trust me, we all have oppressions. We all have different forms of discrimination that happen. But depending on what you look like or the subgroup that you are a part of, especially even trans women, you face different barriers, right? Everybody can agree with me on that, and if you can't, oh well. But the thing is that we are indeed fighting some of the same battles. Like all of our battles are not different, but you get to do it with a different armor, right? Think about the skin color that you have, or that has been not diagnosed for you, but has been socially categorized for you. You get to fight this battle with a different armor that creates a certain privilege, and you need to figure out how to use that armor in order to advocate for others, right? And then women of color, or racially stigmatized identities, we also have to think about how we support one another, and also women in general, because we live in this place where separation has become our default, where we think that it's us versus them, this zero-sum belief that, hey, if I help you, that's going to hurt my right, and I don't want to do that. So there's no way that I'm going to advocate for the things that you need, because that is going to hurt me. And that is a false belief. The best tool that an oppressor has is to control the mind of a person who is oppressed. And how do you do that? You do that through imagery. You do that through misinforming someone of their rights and the things that they have. And we have done that for a very long time, especially in our career fields. And it has made us adversaries and not allies and advocates. And that has to change. You see, here in Seattle, in our very liberal city, we know that there's a wage gap. We know that we are facing challenges, right? Any study that you look at, you're going to see anywhere from a 25 to a 35% salary gap for women in general. And then if you break that down into other subgroups, and people love to do it, especially when it comes to race, you're going to see that there's even more of a gender, or more of a wage gap that exists. question you have to ask yourself is, what is it that you are willing to do? What is it that you are willing to sacrifice in order to advocate for someone else? It's two things that I want to leave you with, okay? And I already talked about one of them. The first is self-identity and reflection. I am going to say this to you over and over again. If you want to be an advocate and you want to work in DEI, you have to figure out a way to self-reflect on who you are, how you have become who you are, and how that impacts the way that you treat other people. Because if you don't do that, you could be contributing to someone else's oppression and not even know it, while you are simultaneously fighting for their right. You have certain biases that you need to check. You can't eliminate bias. It's impossible. People are like, oh, we are going to eliminate bias. And my default is, shut up. No, you are not. You are going to address a bias that exists. The second, and I want to end with this, is forgiveness. Now, forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, and I'm a firm believer that it also does not mean you have to go back and kiss someone's ass when they have offended you. But I'm telling you forgiveness from the perspective of you forgiving yourself for things that may happen. Because pain is one of the biggest barriers to being able to address DEI. Because if you live in a space, especially women of color, and I'm saying that for racially stereotyped identities, know that you have experienced more pain in some regard than others who don't wear that same identity. And I'm saying that you have to practice forgiveness in order to be able to overcome some of the things that you have faced. You don't forget them, right? You never forget them. Those things should be part of your why you are advocating, why you are fighting, why you are doing the things every day you are to fighting for equity and opportunity. And also sexuality. All of those things are things that you need to pay important attention to and constantly reflect on as you take on a trajectory for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you.